Welcome to the PCN call-in program.
Joining us this evening from our Philadelphia Bureau in the Inquirer building is Joe Grace, Executive Director of Ceasefire PA. And from our Western Pennsylvania Bureau in the Post-Gazette building is Kim Stolfer, Board Member for the Allegheny County Sportsmen League and Chair of Firearm Owners Against Crime. Mr. Stolfer, are Pennsylvania gun laws adequate?
They're more than adequate. As a matter of fact, in many cases, they're overbearing. The fact is that prosecutors and judges are not applying the laws against those most likely to commit the crime that we all have such a problem with, such as the killing of a Philadelphia police officer. And it's high time we examine their effectiveness and their lack of application against the criminals in our society.
And Mr. Grace, same question to you. Do you believe that Pennsylvania gun laws are adequate?
Pennsylvania's gun laws are not adequate. The example of the murder of Philadelphia police officer Stephen Lesbinski proves that point. Officer Lesbinski, working in the line of duty, was killed with an assault rifle, an SKS assault rifle designed for warfare that has no business on the streets of Pennsylvania. Also found in the van that was implicated in the robbery that led to the killing was a stolen handgun. We know of laws that we can pass through the General Assembly. The governor's ready to sign them to get these kind of weapons off our streets to make our police officers and the public safer.
Well, viewers, if you have any questions or comments for our guest about proposed one gun a month legislation, the reauthorizing of the federal assault weapons ban, or anything else that pertains to Pennsylvania gun laws, the toll-free number to call is 1-877-PA6-5001. And again, that number is 1-877-PA6-5001. Remember, it's a toll-free call, so dial it well, and we'll begin taking your calls shortly. Mr. Stolfer and Mr. Grace, thank you both for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Teresa.
Now, Mr. Grace, I want to direct the first question to you. How many gun-related deaths are there annually in the nation as well as in Pennsylvania?
Every year in the United States, 30,000 people die due to firearms. That includes homicides, that includes suicides, and that includes accidents. There are a huge number of homicides caused by illegal handguns, to a lesser extent, but still a deadly weapon, the assault weapon rifle, the kind of weapon just used to kill Officer Lesbinski. But the real problem in our country is access to illegal handguns. We are awash in them from state to state. Pennsylvania has a problem from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, from Erie to York, and many points in between. We know what to do about this problem. So far, there's been a lack of political will on the part of the General Assembly to deal with that. We think the tide is changing, however.
Now, Mr. Stolfer, before we go any further in the program, I want to take a couple of minutes to define some things for our viewers this evening. I want you to give me the definition, the difference between a handgun, an assault weapon, and modified assault weapons.
Well, first of all, a handgun encompasses several varieties, such as manually operated and semi-automatic, which is a gas or blowback operated. What you're calling an assault weapon is really a fully automatic battle rifle with a machine gun or ability to fire until you release the trigger, which is something that's not on the streets, no matter what Mr. Grace says. The modified assault weapon that you're talking about is a term of art that doesn't apply to any type of real application to the gun issue in the gun industry. But I would like to take issue with what Mr. Grace said. Officer Lesbinski is dead because of groups like Ceasefire PA not allowing the legislature to focus on where the real problem lies. And that's the fact that the criminals that shot Mr. Lesbinski should have been in jail, and they were not prosecuted for the gun laws we now have. And he would be alive today if they did that.
Teresa?
Yes.
Could I respond to that?
Absolutely. Go ahead, sir.
I think it's shameless that Mr. Stolfer would somehow suggest just now that Ceasefire Pennsylvania, a group working closely with law enforcement, with police officers, with police chiefs, and rank and file across our state, to see a lost and stolen handgun reporting requirement passed into law, to see an assault weapon ban passed into law. We stand with police and law enforcement. And to suggest that somehow we had something to do with the assassination of a Philadelphia police officer killed with an assault rifle. Make no mistake, it was an assault rifle that has no business being on the streets of Pennsylvania. Why does the NRA or groups like Mr. Stolfer's group want lethal offensive weapons designed for warfare be permitted to be on the streets of Pennsylvania? I would ask him that.
That's not the issue, Mr. Grace. The issue here is that law-abiding citizens should not have the rights predicated on the misdeeds of criminals. And the fact remains is that your group has never worked in the legislature to do anything about violent criminals. Your only sole goal is to limit the rights of law-abiding citizens. And as an example, you say you work with law enforcement. Well, how about Chief of Detectives Joe Fox, where he said you didn't need greater gun laws, but you needed to focus on those among us that commit the heinous crimes. And Handgun Control says that Pennsylvania is in the 10th most restrictive state on gun laws. And I have here the gun laws. Here they are, 126 pages of gun laws that have been added to our legal books and are available for prosecutors to use. And yet we're not doing it, and you never mention it. Yet we do, and we're always working to stop criminals, not feel-good legislation like what you recommend.
Now, Mr. Grace, how do current Pennsylvania gun laws on dealing with purchase and possession compare with other states? And I'm going to have you break this down into a couple of categories: licenses and permits for purchases.
Well, I think the best example, if you want to compare one state to another when it comes to purchase, is just going into a gun store or a gun shop in Pennsylvania. To purchase a handgun, you go into the store in Pennsylvania, you go through an instant check, a criminal background check, and if you pass that, you can walk out of the store with as many handguns as you want. You can buy 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 handguns, as many as you want. When you compare that with a neighboring state such as New Jersey or New York, which has much more of a careful series of steps in place before you would be able to purchase the handgun and leave the store or leave the establishment with the handgun, it's no wonder why people come to Pennsylvania to buy as many handguns as they can. Pennsylvania is one of the leading source state for crime guns. That is, when guns are found at the scene of crimes in New Jersey, New York, neighboring states, frequently the gun emanated in Pennsylvania. We have some of the laxest gun laws in the nation. And I want to address something that Mr. Stolfer said a minute ago. Let me be clear. I've worked with Chief of Detectives Joe Fox when he worked with the Philadelphia Police Department. I've worked with Philadelphia police officials for the past 4 years, with the former police commissioner, with the current police commissioner. I'm wearing an emblem of the Fraternal Order of Police in honor of the police officers fallen in the line of duty. We work closely every single day with police. Police are asking for stronger gun laws in our Commonwealth. And I want to make it very clear that Ceasefire Pennsylvania stands on the side of law enforcement and ordinary citizens across our state.
Mr. Stolfer, same question to you. Brief response, please.
Well, obviously, Mr. Grace hasn't really worked with Detective Fox, or he'd know what he wrote in a letter to the editor about not going after more gun laws, going after the criminals, and calling the Philadelphia justice system the injustice system. But in reality, Pennsylvania laws are, again, this is what the Brady campaign said, the 10th most restrictive in the nation. And no one from out of state can go into Pennsylvania and buy a handgun. It's illegal to buy handguns interstate. So Mr. Grace is confusing the issues here about people coming to Pennsylvania and lawfully buying guns. On top of that, Pennsylvania laws are in conformity with federal laws. And you go through a rigid background check, you have 2 instant check systems that are checked, and your whole record is open and laid bare by the current system. And again, here we have the laws. And Mr. Grace seems to think these are inadequate. And I'd like to know why. He's looking in this direction. If we really want to control crime, then we should be looking at some other direction, which is what Detective Fox said, and let's go after the criminals and quit make believe that this is going to do anything, because the National Academy of Sciences says everything he's recommending fails. The Centers for Disease Control Studies says everything he's recommending fails. And he's not telling the truth about the rest of these issues. And I have the studies to prove it, and they do not.
Well, gentlemen, let's take our first phone call of the evening. We have Michael on the line from Harrisburg. Michael, you're on PCN Live.
Good evening. How you doing?
Very well, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Grace is just entirely wrong. Just completely wrong. First of all, the majority of people who commit crimes with handguns are already subject to a complete 100% ban on possession of firearms. Anyone who's ever committed a felony is not allowed to own a firearm, can't buy a firearm. The fact remains is the majority of the crime being committed in this country are being committed by gangs, career criminals, and illegal aliens and drug traffickers coming into the country that the country won't do anything about. He's also wrong about the SKS being an assault rifle. It does not have select fire capability. It will not fire full automatic, and it is no different from any other semi-automatic hunting rifle. It happens to have been a military rifle. A lot of people collect military rifles. I have a lot of them. And I'm tired of people wanting to take away my rights because people like him go out and lie about what's really going on.
Teresa?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Grace.
I have a question for either the caller, and I respect his right to his opinion, or for Mr. Stolfer. Given what the SKS assault rifle did to Philadelphia police officer Steve Lesbinski, I just wanted to ask, so that I understand the position of the other side, is it that the SKS assault rifle has a place in Pennsylvania life, that people should be able to go out and purchase it and have it in their possession? I really just want to see that I understand where the other side is on this issue.
Well, Mr. Grace, the caller is gone, so Mr. Stoffler will put the question to you.
Again, Mr. Grace is focusing on the instrumentality of the issue, and this is not the problem. He's trying to deflect attention from the fact that the people that killed the police officer should not have been on the street. And his group, Ceasefire PA, said nothing about this. One man had 28 pages of a criminal record. The other two should have been in jail as well. And if they had been prosecuted for the gun laws, instead of having them dropped or concurrently sentenced, they'd be in jail. But he said nothing. Ceasefire PA said nothing. And it's long past due for them to be held accountable and for them to stand up and be counted whenever these issues come to the forefront. And the caller was right. This is no different than any other kind of semi-automatic rifle, and it's a deflection of the issues like he's been doing since he was in Philadelphia with Mayor Street and with all the other issues in politics he's been involved in. And I will not allow this to be an issue because I fought for this country and I swore an oath to the Constitution. And he will do what's right, and we will fight for what's right, and we will not tolerate police being killed by career criminals, no matter what Ceasefire PA says.
Well, next we're off to East Stroudsburg to speak with Joseph. Joseph, you have the floor, sir.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Mr. Grace, I would like to know exactly how you feel that SKS so-called assault rifle killed that police officer.
I actually want to ask again, what is it about this weapon? Why are we defending this weapon? A weapon
We're
that
not defending the weapon. We're trying to find out why you keep bringing up the weapon. The weapon is an inanimate object that needs someone to pull a trigger on it.
Yeah.
The person who pulled the trigger on that specific weapon was a career criminal who is not allowed to have that weapon by law.
I'm going to quote, if I may, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey, who, when he was confronted with this same question just a few days ago at a news conference in the city, said if people had seen what happened to police officer Lesbinski 2 weeks ago, they would